My name is Nancy, and I'm 52 years old. I've lived in Daytona Beach my whole life, in the same neighborhood where I grew up, 3 blocks from the ocean, where the sound of waves has been a soundtrack to every chapter of my existence. I thought I knew what betrayal felt like. I thought I had experienced every kind of heartbreak a person could endure. I was wrong. It started on a Thursday evening in late September. The air still carried that thick Florida humidity, the kind that makes your clothes stick to your skin the moment you step outside. My sister Diane had organized a family dinner at the Cellar, this upscale restaurant downtown that she'd been raving about for months. It wasn't a special occasion, not a birthday or anniversary, just one of those dinners Diane liked to arrange to keep the family connected, she said. To maintain our bond. I should have known something was off from the beginning. My brother-in-law Richard was too cheerful, too attentive. He kept refilling my wine glass before it was even half empty, asking about my work at the hospital, where I've been a nurse for 27 years, complimenting the earrings I was wearing that my late mother had given me. Richard had never been the warm type. He was the kind of man who showed up to family events at the bare minimum and spent most of his time checking his phone under the table. But that night, he was different. Present, almost performatively so. Diane looked beautiful as always. My younger sister had this way of putting herself together that made everything look effortless, her blonde hair perfectly styled, her makeup subtle but flawless, wearing a cream-colored dress that probably cost more than my monthly car payment. She worked in real estate, specialized in luxury beachfront properties, and she'd done well for herself. Really well. The kind of well that made her modest upbringing feel like a distant memory she'd rather forget. My daughter Emma was there too, sitting across from me, 24 years old and trying to figure out her life after college. She'd moved back home 6 months ago, something that had strained her relationship in ways I hadn't anticipated. The constant negotiations about rent, about her staying out late, about her seeming lack of direction. I loved her desperately. But living together again as adults had been harder than either of us expected. The dinner itself was pleasant enough. We talked about surface things, the upcoming hurricane season, the new construction on Beach Street, Diane's latest big sale, an oceanfront mansion to some retired CEO from New York. Richard ordered an expensive bottle of wine, something Italian with a name I couldn't pronounce. Emma picked at her food and kept glancing at her phone. Normal family dinner stuff. It was when the check came that everything started to unravel. I reached for my wallet intending to split the bill as we usually did and pulled out my debit card. The one connected to my primary checking account, the account where my nursing salary was deposited every 2 weeks, where I kept the money for my mortgage, my utilities, my life. I handed it to the server, a young woman with a bright smile who disappeared toward the front of the restaurant. She came back 3 minutes later, her smile noticeably dimmer. "I'm sorry, ma'am," she said quietly, leaning close so the whole table wouldn't hear. "Your card has been declined. Would you like to try another form of payment?" My face went hot and declined. That was impossible. I checked my account that morning on my phone while drinking coffee. There had been plenty of money, more than enough to cover my portion of the dinner. "There must be a mistake," I said, my voice tight with embarrassment. "Can you try it again?" She nodded and walked away. I could feel everyone at the table watching me. Diane's perfectly shaped eyebrows slightly raised. Richard suddenly very interested in the dessert menu. Emma looking down at her lap. The server returned, this time with the manager, an older man in a black suit. "Ma'am, I'm sorry, but the card has been declined again. Additionally, I received a notification that the card has been blocked by your financial institution. You'll need to contact your bank." Blocked. My card had been blocked. Richard immediately pulled out his credit card with an exaggerated flourish. "Don't worry about it, Nancy. Dinner's on me tonight. Family takes care of family, right?" He said it with this magnanimous tone that made my skin crawl. Like he was doing me this enormous favor. "I'll pay you back," I said automatically, my mind racing. "I don't understand what happened, but I'll figure it out and pay you back tomorrow." "No rush," he said, smiling that too wide smile again. "Really? No rush at all." We left the restaurant shortly after. I hugged Diane goodbye in the parking lot, her perfume expensive and overwhelming. Emma was quiet on the drive home, staring out the window at the palm trees lining A1A, their fronds swaying in the ocean breeze. "Are we okay?" she asked finally as I pulled into our driveway. "Financially, I mean." "We're fine," I said, though my hands were shaking as I turned off the ignition. "It's just a mix-up. I'll call the bank in the morning." But I didn't wait until morning. The moment I got inside, I grabbed my laptop and logged into my online banking. The page loaded slowly, our internet always lagging in the evenings. And then I saw it. My checking account balance, $1,847.23. That couldn't be right. 2 days ago, I'd had nearly $18,000 in that account. Money I've been saving for years, my emergency fund, the cushion that let me sleep at night knowing I could handle whatever came my way. A medical emergency, a car breakdown, a period of unemployment. That money represented security in a world that felt increasingly unstable. I clicked through to the transaction history, my heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. There, dated that very morning at 9:47 a.m. was a transfer. Wire transfer outgoing, $16. 0.00 recipient, Clearwater Holdings LLC authorized by. Account holder. I stared at the screen until the words blurred. Clearwater Holdings. I'd never heard of them. I'd certainly never authorized a $16,000 wire transfer to them or anyone else. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely operate my phone. I called the after-hours customer service number for my bank, navigating through the automated menu with growing panic until finally, a human voice answered. This is Marcus with First Coastal Bank. How can I help you this evening? My account, I said, my voice cracking. There's been a transfer. A huge transfer that I didn't make. $16,000 is gone. I'm sorry to hear that, ma'am. Let me pull up your account. Can you verify your full name, account number, and the last 4 digits of your social security number? I gave him the information, listening to the click of his keyboard. On the other end of the line, okay, Ms. Patterson, I'm showing that wire transfer you're referencing. It was initiated this morning at 9:47 a.m. through our online banking portal using your login credentials. The system shows that the security questions were answered correctly and the transfer was confirmed via the email address on file. But I didn't do it, I said, louder now. I was at work. I was in the middle of my shift at the hospital. I didn't log in, I didn't answer any security questions, I didn't confirm anything. There was a pause. Ms. Patterson, I'm going to escalate this to our fraud department. I'm also placing an immediate freeze on your account to prevent any additional unauthorized activity. You'll need to come into a branch first thing tomorrow morning to file a formal dispute and complete the necessary paperwork. Do you have a pen? I'm going to give you a case number. I wrote down the number with a hand that didn't feel like my own. After I hung up, I sat in my kitchen in the dark, the only light coming from my laptop screen, and tried to understand what had just happened. Someone had stolen $16,000 from me. Someone who knew my login credentials. Who knew the answers to my security questions? Who had access to the email account I used for banking notifications? The security questions. What was your mother's maiden name? Where did you meet your spouse? What was the name of your first pet? These weren't random facts. These were pieces of my history that I'd shared over dinner tables, during late-night conversations, in casual mentions over the years. My mother's maiden name was Hartley. I'd met my ex-husband Jack at a 4th of July party on the beach when I was 19. My first pet was a golden retriever named Sunny. Anyone in my family would know these things. The thought arrived like a cold wind, unwelcome and undeniable. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed watching the ceiling fan rotate slowly, listening to the distant sound of the ocean, and ran through possibilities in my mind. A hacker? A data breach? But why would a random hacker know the answers to my security questions? Why would they transfer the money to something called Clearwater Holdings, instead of some untraceable overseas account? Around 3 in the morning, I got up and made coffee. My hands were steadier now, the initial shock replaced by something colder and more focused. I opened my laptop again and started documenting everything I could remember. Every conversation with Diane and Richard over the past year. Every time they'd asked about my finances, my retirement plans, my savings. There were more instances than I'd realized. Last Thanksgiving, Richard had asked me, seemingly casually, if I'd ever thought about investing my savings instead of just letting it sit in a checking account. You could be making real money, Nancy, he'd said over pumpkin pie. I know some people. Good opportunities. I'd laughed it off, said I was risk-averse, that I preferred the security of knowing exactly where my money was. He'd shrugged, changed the subject. But now I wondered if that had been an early probe, testing my interest in moving my money somewhere he could access it more easily. In February, Diane had called me crying. One of her real estate deals had fallen through, she'd said, and she was short on her mortgage payment. Could I help? Just this once. I'd sent her $1,500. She promised to pay me back within a month. She never did. When I gently reminded her about it in April, she'd gotten defensive, said she was going through a hard time and couldn't believe I was being so petty about money. With my own sister, I'd apologized. Actually apologized for asking for my own money back. In June, Richard had shown up at my house unannounced one afternoon when Emma was at work. He'd said he was in the neighborhood, thought he'd stop by. We'd had coffee on the porch, talked about nothing much. But now I remembered him asking to use my bathroom, disappearing inside my house for nearly 10 minutes. At the time, I'd thought nothing of it. Now I wondered if he'd been looking through my papers, my mail, searching for account information. The thought made my skin crawl. The violation of it. Someone I trusted in my home, rifling through my private documents, planning how to rob me. I documented all of it in a Word document, time-stamping my memories as accurately as I could. Michael would need this. The police would need this. A pattern of behavior. Evidence that this hadn't been opportunistic but calculated. By the time the sun rose, painting my bedroom walls in shades of pink and orange, I had 7 pages of notes. This wasn't just a banking problem. This was a conspiracy. This was my family plotting against me for months, maybe longer. I thought about my mother, who died 3 years ago from pancreatic cancer. She loved both Diane and me equally, or so I believed. But in her final weeks, when she was weak and on so much morphine she could barely stay conscious, she gripped my hand and said something I'd never forgotten. "Take care of your sister, Nancy. She's not as strong as you. She needs more help." At the time, I'd taken it as a general request to look out for Diane. Now, I wondered if Mom had known something I hadn't. If she'd seen weaknesses in Diane's character, vulnerabilities that could be exploited or that could lead her to exploit others. Diane had always been the pretty one, the charming one, the one who could talk her way into or out of anything. I'd been the responsible one, the caretaker. The one who cleaned up messes and made sure everyone else was okay, even at the expense of my own needs. Our father had left when we were young, 7 and 4. Mom had raised us alone, working 2 jobs, stretching every dollar until it screamed. We'd been poor, not desperately so, but aware always that money was tight, that we couldn't have the things other kids had. That poverty had shaped us differently. For me, it had created a deep need for security, for savings, for the assurance that I'd never be that vulnerable again. Every dollar saved was protection against a world that could take everything away without warning. For Diane, it seemed to have created something else. A hunger for the things she'd been denied. A willingness to reach for a lifestyle beyond her means. And apparently, a willingness to steal from the person who'd helped her most to achieve it. The irony was brutal. I'd worked so hard to avoid being vulnerable, and in doing so, I'd made myself the perfect target. At 8:30 in the morning, I called the law office of Michael Chen. Michael had handled my divorce from Jack 7 years ago. Had been thorough and compassionate and ruthlessly effective. If anyone could help me navigate this, it was him. The divorce had been ugly. Jack had been a good man when we married, or I thought so. But 23 years of marriage had revealed layers of resentment and incompatibility we'd both been too young to recognize at the start. He'd wanted a wife who stayed home, who made his comfort the center of her existence. I wanted partnership, equality, respect for my career and ambitions. The breaking point had come when I'd been offered a promotion at the hospital, a move to a supervisory position that would have meant better pay and more responsibility, but also some evening shifts. Jack had forbidden it, actually used that word, forbidden, as if I were a child requiring his permission. I'd taken the promotion anyway. He'd filed for divorce within a month. Michael had fought for me, ensured I got my fair share of our assets, protected my pension. He'd been more than a lawyer. He'd been an advocate when I'd felt too beaten down to advocate for myself. If anyone could untangle this nightmare with Diane and Richard, it was him. His secretary put me through immediately when I said it was urgent. "Nancy," Michael's voice was warm and professional. "It's good to hear from you. What's going on?" I told him everything. The dinner, the blocked card, the missing $16,000. The wire transfer to a company I'd never heard of. My voice cracked several times, but I pushed through, determined to get all the facts out clearly. The silence on the other end of the line stretched long enough that I thought we'd been disconnected. "Michael, I'm here," he said, and his tone had changed. "Serious now? Careful. Nancy, I need you to not touch anything else in your accounts. Don't make any transfers, don't move any money around. Come to my office this afternoon, 2 o'clock, and bring every piece of documentation you have. Bank statements, transaction histories, everything." "Why? What is it?" "Clearwater Holdings," he said slowly. "I've heard that name before. If it's what I think it is, this isn't just fraud, Nancy. This is much more complicated. And if I'm right about who's behind it." He paused. "We need to talk in person." The way he said it sent ice through my veins. "Michael, you're scaring me." "Good. You should be scared. But you should also know that if what I suspect is true, we have legal options. Strong ones. But they're going to require you to make some very difficult decisions." "What kind of decisions?" "The kind that change family relationships permanently. I'll explain when you get here." 2 o'clock. Don't be late. I spent the morning at the bank, filling out forms, speaking with a fraud investigator named Patricia, who asked me the same questions over and over in slightly different ways. Where was I when the transfer occurred? Who has access to my computer? Who knows my passwords? Had I clicked on any suspicious links recently? The bank branch was one I've been using for 15 years. Ever since I'd moved back to Daytona Beach after my divorce. The tellers knew me by name. The manager, a kind woman named Susan, had helped me set up my savings account, had congratulated me every time my balance reached a new milestone. Now Susan sat in on my interview with Patricia, her face troubled, apologetic even though none of this was her fault. The transfer was authorized. Using all the correct credentials, Patricia explained, her voice apologetic but firm. She was younger than me, maybe 35, with sharp eyes and a demeanor that suggested she'd had this conversation many times before. Your username, your password, correct answers to all 3 security questions, and confirmation through the email address on file. That makes it significantly harder to dispute. The bank will investigate, but I have to be honest with you, Ms. Patterson, recovery of funds in cases like this can be difficult and lengthy. How lengthy? Months? Potentially longer. And there's no guarantee of full recovery. If the funds have been dispersed to multiple accounts, especially if any have left the country, it becomes exponentially more complicated. I felt something inside me crack. So you're saying I might never get my money back? That someone can just steal from me, use my own security information against me, and face no consequences? Patricia's expression softened slightly. I'm saying the process is complex, but we take these cases very seriously, especially when there are indicators of elder financial abuse. I'm 52, I said. I'm not elderly. Financial exploitation can happen to anyone at any age, Susan interjected gently. But there are additional protections and resources available for anyone over 50. Patricia, can we get Nancy connected with our victim services coordinator? Over the next 2 hours, I was passed between different departments, each person adding another layer of documentation to my case. A victim services coordinator named James gave me pamphlets about financial fraud and support groups. A technical specialist examined the device information associated with the unauthorized transfer and confirmed it came from a laptop I'd never used, accessing the account from an IP address that traced to a coffee shop in Ormond Beach, the town just north of Daytona. Do you know anyone who lives in or frequents Ormond Beach? The specialist asked. My sister and Richard lived in Ormond Beach, had lived there for 6 years in a waterfront house they bought during the real estate boom. Yes, I said quietly. My sister. The specialist made a note. Patricia made a note. James, the victim services coordinator, made a note. Everyone was making notes, documenting my pain and violation with clinical efficiency. We'll need to file a police report, Patricia said finally. The bank requires it for any claim over $10,000. Would you like us to contact them? Or would you prefer to do it yourself? I'll do it, I said. After I speak with my attorney. I left the bank feeling nauseous, drove to a coffee shop on Beach Street, and sat in my car drinking lukewarm coffee until it was time to go to Michael's office. My phone buzzed constantly. Text messages from Emma asking if I was okay. A missed call from Diane that I didn't return. A voicemail from a number I didn't recognize that turned out to be a reporter from the Daytona Beach News Journal, somehow already aware that something was happening, asking if I wanted to comment on financial fraud allegations. How did reporters know? Had the bank leaked something? Or had Diane, realizing she was under investigation, tried to get ahead of the story somehow? I deleted the voicemail without responding. His practice was in a renovated historic building downtown, all exposed brick and tall windows. His secretary, an efficient woman named Linda, who I remembered from my divorce proceedings, showed me into his office immediately. Michael stood when I entered. He was in his mid-40s, always dressed impeccably, today in a navy suit with a silver tie. His desk was organized chaos, files stacked neatly. To computer monitors, a small collection of what looked like case law books. Sit, he said, gesturing to the leather chair across from his desk. Tell me everything again, every detail you can remember. I did. He took notes on a legal pad, occasionally stopping me to ask clarifying questions. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair and pressed his fingers together in that way lawyers do when they're thinking. Clearwater Holdings, he said finally. It's a shell company, an LLC registered in Delaware, which means it's designed for privacy. Minimal disclosure requirements. I've seen it before in a few cases involving asset protection, or in less savory situations, asset concealment. I don't understand. Asset concealment from what? From creditors, from legal judgments, from spouses in divorce proceedings. He paused. Nancy, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest. Do you have any reason to believe someone in your family might be in financial trouble? The question landed like a punch. What? No. I mean, Diane and Richard are doing great. They just renovated their house. They take these expensive vacations. They? I stopped. Saw Michael's expression. Expensive lifestyle, he said quietly. That's interesting. Because Clearwater Holdings was registered 8 months ago. The registered agent is a law firm that specializes in helping people hide assets, and one of the principals listed on the filing documents is someone named Richard Marsh. My brother-in-law. The room tilted. I gripped the armrest of my chair. That can't be right, I heard myself say. Richard wouldn't die and would never. I pulled preliminary records this morning after our call. Michael continued. Public filings. Clearwater Holdings has been the recipient of several wire transfers over the past 6 months. From various sources, your transfer this morning is just the latest you're saying Richard stole from me. I'm saying Richard, possibly with help, appears to have orchestrated a transfer of your funds to a company he controls. Whether your sister was involved, I don't know yet. But Nancy, this gets worse. How could it possibly be worse? Michael turned one of his monitors toward me. On the screen was a legal document, dense with text. He pointed to a section highlighted in yellow. This is a mortgage refinance document for the property owned by Diane and Richard Marsh. Filed 2 months ago. They pulled a significant amount of equity out of their home. $340,000. I stared at the number. Why would they need that much money? That's what we need to find out. But people don't drain equity from their homes and create shell companies to move money around unless they're in serious financial distress or they're hiding something. Often both. He handed me a tissue. I didn't realize I was crying until then. What do I do? I asked. We build a case. We document everything. We find out where your money went and why. And then we decide how to proceed, legally speaking. He leaned forward. But Nancy, I need to prepare you for something. If your family is involved in this, the fallout is going to be significant. Relationships will be damaged, possibly irreparably. Are you ready for that? I thought about Diane, my little sister who I'd protected from bullies in elementary school, who I'd helped pay for when she couldn't afford her first apartment, who called me when her first marriage fell apart and needed somewhere to stay. My sister who had looked at me across that dinner table last night, with those perfectly shaped eyebrows raised when my card was declined. Had she known what Richard had done? Had she helped him do it? I don't have a choice, I said. That money is everything I have. Michael nodded. Then we get started. Today. If you're watching this, I want you to know something. This moment, sitting in that lawyer's office, realizing that someone I loved and trusted had violated me in the most intimate way possible. This was the moment I understood that betrayal isn't just about what's taken from you. It's about the person you thought you knew being revealed as someone entirely different. It's about the ground shifting beneath your feet, and realizing you were never standing on solid ground at all. Take a second and drop a comment. Tell me where you're watching from. Have you ever had someone close to you betray your trust? You're not alone in this. And if this story is hitting home, go ahead and subscribe. Because what I discovered next you won't believe. Michael spent the next 2 days gathering information. He had contacts, resources I didn't understand, but was grateful for. A private investigator named Sarah who specialized in financial fraud. A forensic accountant named David who could trace money through the kind of complex corporate structures designed to hide it. I went to work at the hospital, went through the motions of my shifts, checking vitals and administering medications and comforting patients while my mind was somewhere else entirely. My coworkers asked if I was okay. I smiled and said I was just tired. Nobody pushed. Emma noticed something was wrong. She asked me twice if everything was all right, and both times I told her it was fine. Just work stress. I couldn't bring myself to tell her yet. Couldn't find the words to explain that her aunt, the woman who'd been at every one of her birthday parties, who'd helped pay for her senior year trip to Washington, D.C., who Emma looked up to and admired, might have helped steal her mother's life savings. On Monday afternoon, Michael called me. Can you come to the office? We found something. I left work early, told my supervisor I had a family emergency, which wasn't a lie. The drive downtown felt longer than usual, every red light an eternity. Michael's office felt different this time, more crowded. Sarah the investigator was there, a woman in her 50s with short gray hair and sharp eyes. David the accountant, younger than I expected, maybe 35 with glasses and the kind of focused intensity of someone who dealt in numbers and facts. Nancy, sit down, Michael said, and the gentleness in his voice made my stomach drop. Sarah spoke first. Ms. Patterson, we've traced a wire transfer from your account. The money went to Clearwater Holdings, as you know. From there, it was immediately dispersed to 3 different accounts. One was used to make a payment on a commercial property loan. Another was transferred to an offshore account in the Cayman Islands. The third, about $5,000, was used to make purchases of various retailers in the Daytona Beach area. She slid a printed document across the desk, credit card statements. I recognized some of the stores: Nordstrom, Apple, a high-end furniture store on International, Speedway Boulevard. These purchases were made by Diane Marsh, Sarah continued. We have timestamps, security footage from 2 of the locations showing her making the purchases. And the credit card used is tied to Clearwater Holdings. My sister had spent my money on clothes and electronics and furniture. The commercial property loan, David the accountant interjected, is for a real estate investment that Richard Marsh made 18 months ago. A small strip mall in Port Orange. The investment has been losing money consistently. He's been making payments to keep it afloat, but he's underwater by approximately $200,000. And the offshore account? I asked, my voice hollow. That's where it gets complicated, Michael said. Offshore accounts are difficult to trace, but we have reason to believe it's part of a larger pattern. Nancy, we think Richard has been moving money for months, possibly years, trying to cover losses from bad investments. He's been stealing from other people? We don't have proof of that yet, Sarah said carefully. But the pattern is consistent with someone who's desperate and increasingly reckless. I looked to the 3 of them, these strangers who were dissecting my family's crimes like a surgical procedure. My sister. Did she know? Michael and Sarah exchanged a glance. Based on what we've found, Michael said slowly, Diane has been actively involved. She made purchases with your money. She's listed as a co-manager of Clearwater Holdings. She signed documents. This wasn't just Richard acting alone. The grief hit me then, sudden and overwhelming. Not just for the money, though that was devastating enough, but for the sister I thought I had. For the relationship I believed was real. What do we do now? I asked when I could speak again. We have 2 options, Michael said. We can pursue criminal charges. Theft, fraud, wire fraud across state lines given the offshore component. The penalties would be significant, possibly prison time. And the second option? We negotiate. We confront them with what we know, demand full restitution, and resolve this civilly. It's faster, less public, but there's no guarantee they'll cooperate or that we'll recover everything. I thought about Diane in prison, Richard behind bars, the family that would be destroyed, Emma finding out her aunt was a thief, holidays that would never happen again, relationships severed permanently. And then I thought about my empty checking account. The years of nursing shifts, of budgeting carefully, of saying no to things I wanted so I could save for security. The retirement that now felt impossibly far away. The emergency fund that was supposed to protect me, gone. I want it all back, I said. Every penny. And I want them to face consequences. Michael nodded. Then we file charges. But Nancy, once we do this, there's no going back. Are you absolutely certain? I met his eyes. I've never been more certain of anything. The next week moved in a blur. Michael filed a criminal complaint with the Daytona Beach Police Department because the amount exceeded $10,000 and involved wire fraud. The FBI's Financial Crimes Division became involved. 2 agents showed up at Michael's office. A man and woman in dark suits who asked me to tell my story for what felt like the 100th time. They were professional, sympathetic even, but I could see the calculation in their eyes. This was a case to them, a crime to be solved. They weren't thinking about the fact that the defendants were my sister and brother-in-law. We'll need to interview them, the female agent said, Agent Morrison. We'll bring them in, let them know they're under investigation, give them an opportunity to cooperate. What if they run? I asked. We've already placed alerts on their accounts and travel documents if they try to leave the country or move large sums of money. We'll know. It happened on a Thursday morning, exactly 2 weeks after that dinner at the cellar. I was at work when Michael called to tell me that federal agents had shown up at Diane and Richard's house at 7 a.m. with a warrant to seize financial documents and electronic devices. How did they react? I asked, stepping into an empty patient room for privacy. According to Agent Morrison, Richard tried to act confused, claimed it was all a misunderstanding. Diane started crying, said they were being persecuted. He paused. Nancy, they're asking to speak with you. Absolutely not. Not without you present, I agree. I've already told them any communication goes through me. But that afternoon, my phone rang with a call from Diane. I stared at her name on the screen, my thumb hovering over the decline button. Against my better judgment, against Michael's explicit instructions not to engage, I answered, Nancy. Her voice was thick with tears, that particular quality of crying she perfected over the years, the kind that made you want to comfort her even when she was in the wrong. Nancy, please, you have to stop this. You have to tell them this is all a mistake. A mistake? My voice came out cold, controlled. I was surprised by how steady I sounded. You stole $16,000 from me, Diane. It wasn't stealing. Richard was going to pay you back. There was this investment opportunity. and we just needed to borrow the money for a few weeks. And then you get it back with interest. We were going to surprise you. It was going to be this whole thing where we gave you back way more than we borrowed. And you'd see that we were actually helping you grow your money. The lie was so transparent it was almost insulting. She did ours to come up with a story, and this was the best she could do? You didn't borrow, Diane. Borrowing requires asking permission. Borrowing requires consent. You took. You accessed my account without authorization. You forged my approval. You changed my security settings. So I wouldn't be notified. That's not borrowing. That's theft. That's fraud. You're my sister. She screamed, her grief turning to anger in the way it always did when she wasn't getting what she wanted. How can you do this to family? Do you know what this is going to do to us? Richard could go to prison. I could lose my real estate license. Our lives are being destroyed because you couldn't just talk to us first? Because you had to go running to lawyers and banks and make this into some huge federal case? Talk to you? I felt my own anger rising, hot and righteous, burning away the years of conditioning that had taught me to be accommodating, to keep the peace, to put family harmony above my own needs. When was I supposed to talk to you, Diane? Before or after you stole from me? You sat across from me at that dinner and watched my car get declined, knowing exactly why, and you said nothing. You looked me in the eye and smiled to let me feel that humiliation, that shame, knowing you had caused it. You let Richard pay for my dinner with what was probably my own money, and you acted like he was being generous. There was a pause. I could hear her breathing, harsh and uneven. We were desperate, she said finally, her voice dropping to a whisper. You don't understand what it's like, Nancy. You've always been so careful, so responsible, so perfect with your money. You don't know what it's like to make mistakes, to get in over your head, to watch everything you've built start to crumble. Richard made some bad investments, things that were supposed to be sure things, that everyone said couldn't fail, and they failed anyway. And we got behind on the mortgage, and then we got behind on everything else. And the walls just kept closing in. So you decided to steal from me. We didn't know what else to do. Her voice was rising again. We looked at our options and there was nothing. Nothing except bankruptcy and losing the house and ruining our credit forever. And then Richard remembered you talking about your savings, about how you had this emergency fund just sitting there not doing anything. And we thought maybe we could borrow it just temporarily. And you'd never even know because we'd have it back before you needed it. That money was mine, Diane. Mine. I saved it. I earned it. Every dollar of it came from nursing shifts where I was on my feet for 12 hours, taking care of people, missing holidays and birthdays and sleep. That money represented years of sacrifice, and you had no right to it, no matter how desperate you were. You should have asked. You should have been honest. You should have given me the chance to make my own choice about whether to help you. Would you have? She asked, and there was something bitter in her voice now. Would you have actually helped us if we'd asked? Or would you have given us some lecture about financial responsibility and told us we made our own bed and had to lie in it? The question hurt because there was truth in it. I probably would have said no. I probably would have told them they needed to handle their own problems. But that was my right, my choice to make. It doesn't matter what I would have done, I said. Because you didn't give me that choice. You took it. And now you're going to face the consequences. I'm your sister, she whispered, and I could hear the tears again. I'm your baby sister. Remember when Mom died? Remember how you held me at the funeral and told me we'd always have each other? That family was forever. I did remember. I remembered holding her while she sobbed, feeling her body shake against mine, thinking that despite everything, despite all our differences and difficulties, we were bound by blood and history and love. I believed that bond was unbreakable. I'd been wrong. You broke that bond, I said quietly, not me. You did this. You and Richard. You made the choice to betray me, to violate my trust in the worst possible way. And now you want me to make it okay, to absorb your consequences, to let you get away with it because we're family. But that's not how this works. Family doesn't mean you get to hurt people without repercussions. Nancy, please, I have to go. My attorney told me not to talk to you without him present. This conversation is over. Wait? Just wait 1 second. Can you at least think about Emma? This is going to affect her too. She's going to lose her aunt, her uncle, her cousins. Is that what you want? To destroy her family? The manipulation was breathtaking. She was actually trying to use my daughter against me. Emma is old enough to understand right and wrong, I said. She's old enough to know that actions have consequences. And if she loses relationships because you chose to commit crimes, that's on you, not me. Don't you dare try to make me feel guilty for protecting myself. Don't you dare. I ended the call before she could respond, my hands shaking so badly I nearly dropped the phone. I sat there in Michael's parking lot, trying to steady my breathing, trying to process what had just happened. My sister had stolen from me, and when caught, She tried to justify it, to manipulate me, to make me the villain in a story where I was clearly the victim. Who was this person? When had Diane become someone capable of this? Or had she always been this person, and I just refused to see it? I blocked her number immediately after, my hands shaking. Emma called 10 minutes later, frantic. Mom, what the hell is happening? Aunt Diane just called me crying, saying you're trying to have her arrested? She said something about the FBI and lawyers and her losing everything. Mom, what is going on? I sat down on the floor of the hospital break room, my back against the wall, and told my daughter everything. The stolen money, the shell company, the investigation, her aunt's betrayal, Richard's crimes, the lawyers and investigators, and the terrible choice I'd had to make between family peace and justice. Emma was quiet for a long time after I finished. I could hear her breathing on the other end of the line. Could imagine her processing this information, trying to reconcile the aunt she'd known her whole life with the criminal I was describing. Emma, I said finally. Say something, please. I don't know what to say, Mom. I can't believe it. Aunt Diane. She's always been so nice to me. She helped me move into my dorm room freshman year. She took me shopping for professional clothes when I got my first interview. She's been at every birthday, every graduation. How could someone who did all that also steal from you? People are complicated, I said, though I was still trying to understand it myself. Sometimes they're capable of both kindness and cruelty. Sometimes the kindness is genuine and sometimes it's manipulation. I don't know which it was with Diane. Maybe both. Did you really call the FBI? Michael, my attorney, brought them in. The dollar amount and the wire fraud make it a federal crime. I didn't have much choice once we discovered what was happening. But Mom, she's family. Can't you just, I don't know, make her pay it back and drop the charges? Does she really have to go to prison? I'd been expecting this. Emma had always been close to Diane, had always seen her as a cool aunt, the fun one, the one who wasn't as strict or demanding as her mother. Of course she'd want to find a way to fix this that didn't involve destroying someone she loved. Emma, listen to me carefully. What Diane and Richard did wasn't a mistake or a moment of poor judgment. They planned this for months. They created a fake company specifically to hide where the money was going. They accessed my account multiple times over weeks. They changed my security settings so I wouldn't find out. This wasn't desperation in the moment. This was calculated theft. But $16,000, is that really worth destroying a family over? The question felt like a slap. Is that what you think I'm doing? Destroying the family? No. I mean, I don't know. I'm just saying, you have other money, right? Your pension and stuff. So you're not going to be homeless or anything. Maybe you could just what, Emma? Just let them get away with it. Just pretend this didn't happen so everyone can go back to acting like we're a normal, happy family? That money was everything I had saved over 27 years of nursing. It was my security, my emergency fund, my retirement buffer. It was peace of mind in a world that can take everything from you in an instant. And they stole it from me like I was a mark, like I was nobody, like my years of work and sacrifice meant nothing. My voice had risen without me realizing it. I took a breath, forced myself to speak more calmly. I understand this is hard for you. I understand you're caught in the middle of something you never asked to be part of. But Emma, I need you to understand something too. If I let this go, if I tell the investigators and the lawyers and the banks that I made a mistake and my family didn't actually steal from me, I'm not just losing that money. I'm telling myself that I don't matter, that I'm not worth protecting, that other people's comfort is more important than my dignity. I didn't mean it like that, Emma said quietly. I'm sorry. This is also overwhelming. 2 days ago we had a normal family dinner. Now you're telling me Aunt Diane is a criminal and Uncle Richard might go to prison. How did this happen so fast? It didn't happen fast. It's been happening for months. We just didn't know about it. What do you need from me? Emma asked finally. How can I help? The question surprised me. I'd expected more resistance, more attempts to talk me out of pursuing charges, more loyalty to Diane. But maybe I'd underestimated my daughter. I need you to support my decision even if you don't fully understand it. I need you to not let Diane or Richard use you as a messenger, or try to get you to convince me to drop the charges. And mostly, I need you to know that I'm still your mom, that I'm still here, and that none of this changes how much I love you or how important you are to me. Of course, Mom. Her voice was thick with emotion. I'm on your side. Always. I might not understand everything about what's happening, but I trust you. If you say they stole from you, they stole from you. If you say this needs to happen, then it needs to happen. Thank you, I whispered, feeling tears prick my eyes for the first time since this whole nightmare began. That means more than you know. Are you okay? Like, really okay? Because I can come home early from work. We can talk more, or we can not talk. We can just be together. I'm okay. Or I will be. This is just it's a lot. It's completely insane, is what it is. My aunt committed fraud. That's not a sentence I ever thought I'd say. She paused. Mom, can I ask you something? Were there signs? Like, looking back, were there things that should have told you something was wrong? I thought about Richard's questions about my finances. Diane's borrowed money never repaid. The 10 minutes Richard had spent in my house that day, claiming he needed to use the bathroom. Yes, I said. There were signs. Small things that didn't seem important at the time but now form a pattern. I ignored them because I wanted to believe the best about people I loved. That was my mistake. That's not a mistake, Mom. That's trust. That's what family is supposed to be. They're the ones who did something wrong, not you. After we hung up, I sat in that break room for another 15 minutes, staring at the beige walls, listening to the muffled sounds of the hospital beyond the door. Codes being called. Equipment beeping. Families in waiting rooms hoping for good news. My phone buzzed with a text from Michael, meeting tomorrow at 9 a.m. Investigator has preliminary findings. This is moving fast. Everything was moving so fast, and yet it also felt like time had stopped, like I was trapped in this moment of betrayal and grief and anger with no way forward and no way back. The investigation moved forward with the kind of methodical precision that only federal agencies can manage. Agent Morrison called me with updates. They'd seized Richard's laptop and found evidence of multiple fraudulent transfers. They'd interviewed the lawyer who'd set up Clearwater Holdings, and he'd admitted, under pressure, that Richard had paid him to create a structure specifically designed to hide assets and move money without clear traceability. The offshore account in the Cayman Islands was more complicated. International law, cooperation agreements, bureaucratic red tape. But they were working on it. We're building a strong case, Agent Morrison told me. Your brother-in-law is looking at significant federal charges. Wire fraud, theft, money laundering. We're talking about decades of potential prison time. And my sister, she's cooperating now. Turned over documents, admitted to her involvement. Her attorney is negotiating for a plea deal in exchange for testimony against Richard. Diane was going to testify against her own husband to save herself. I didn't know how to feel about that. Satisfied, sad, both. The civil case moved faster than the criminal one. Michael filed a lawsuit demanding full restitution, plus interest, plus legal fees, plus punitive damages. We had mountains of evidence. The defense attorney, a slick man from Orlando who specialized in white-collar crime, tried to argue that the transfer was authorized, that there was no criminal intent, that this was a family dispute being blown out of proportion. The judge wasn't buying it. Ms. Patterson's bank account was accessed without her knowledge or consent. Judge Williams said during a preliminary hearing, funds were transferred to a shell company controlled by the defendants. Those funds were then immediately dispersed and used for personal expenses and to cover debts. This isn't a family dispute. This is theft. He granted our motion for immediate asset seizure. Diane and Richard's bank accounts were frozen. A lien was placed on their house. Their cars, their boat, Richard's beloved fishing boat that he bought last summer, were all subject to potential seizure to satisfy the judgment. I saw Diane in the courthouse hallway after that hearing. She looked terrible, her usually perfect appearance disheveled, her eyes red and swollen. She tried to approach me, but her attorney held her back. Nancy, please, she called out. Please, can we just talk? I kept walking. Michael's hand on my elbow, guiding me toward the exit. You can't engage with her, he reminded me. Anything you say can be used in the criminal proceedings. Let the system work. But that night, alone in my house with Emma already asleep in her room, I let myself feel the full weight of what had happened. I'd lost my sister, not to death or distance, but to greed and desperation and a series of choices that had revealed her to be someone I didn't recognize. The sister I'd known, the one I'd loved, maybe she'd never existed. Maybe I'd been seeing what I wanted to see, ignoring the signs of the person she really was. Or maybe people change. Maybe desperation transforms us into monsters we never imagined we could become. I didn't know which was worse. 3 months after that dinner at the Cellar, I sat in a federal courtroom and watched Richard Marsh plead guilty to wire fraud, theft of funds, and money laundering. He'd accepted a plea deal, 7 years in federal prison, full restitution of all stolen funds including the $16,000 taken from me, and permanent forfeiture of Clearwater Holdings, and all associated assets. The courtroom was exactly what I'd expected from years of watching legal dramas on television, yet somehow more mundane. Beige walls, uncomfortable wooden benches, harsh fluorescent lighting that made everyone look slightly ill. The American flag stood in the corner next to the Florida state flag, both looking slightly faded. I sat in the third row of the gallery, Michael on one side of me, Emma on the other. My daughter had taken the day off work to be here, had dressed in a conservative navy dress and held my hand through the entire proceeding. Her presence meant everything to me, a reminder that not everyone I loved had betrayed me. Diane sat in the gallery too, but on the opposite side of the courtroom. She looked like she'd aged 10 years in 3 months. Her usually perfect blonde hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, no makeup. Wearing jeans and a t-shirt instead of her typical designer outfits. She'd lost weight, her face gaunt and hollow. When our eyes met across the room, she looked away immediately, fresh tears streaming down her face. I felt nothing. No satisfaction, no sadness, no anger. Just a vast emptiness where my love for my sister used to be. Richard stood before the judge, his public defender beside him. He'd aged too, his face drawn and pale, his shoulders slumped in defeat. This wasn't the confident, smiling man who'd poured my wine at dinner 3 months ago. This was someone broken, someone who gambled on never getting caught and lost everything. Judge Catherine Walsh presided, a woman in her 60s with iron gray hair, and the kind of no-nonsense demeanor that suggested she'd seen every possible variation of human weakness and wasn't impressed by any of it. Mr. Marsh, she said, her voice carrying easily through the courtroom, you've agreed to plead guilty to 3 counts of wire fraud, 2 counts of theft over $10,000, and 1 count of money laundering. Do you understand the charges against you, yes? Your Honor, Richard's voice was barely audible. And you understand that by entering this plea, you're giving up your right to a trial, your right to confront witnesses, and your right to appeal except under very limited circumstances? Yes, Your Honor. Do you understand that the recommended sentence is 7 years in federal prison, to be followed by 3 years of supervised release? Yes, Your Honor. Judge Walsh looked down at the documents in front of her, then back up at Richard. Mr. Marsh, you've stolen from family members, from friends, from people who trusted you. You've created elaborate schemes to hide your crimes and attempted to profit from the hardship of others. Before I accept your plea, I want to hear from your victims. Ms. Patterson, would you like to make a statement? My heart started racing. I'd known this moment was coming, had even prepared some notes on my phone about what I wanted to say. But now, standing up and walking to the podium at the front of the courtroom, I felt all those careful words evaporate. I looked at Richard. He was staring at his hands, refusing to meet my eyes. You took more than money from me, I said, and was surprised by how steady my voice sounded. You took my sense of security. You took my ability to trust. You took my sister from me. Whether she was complicit from the start or whether you manipulated her into helping you. You looked me in the eye at that dinner, knowing what you'd done, and you pretended to be generous, offering to pay for a meal with what was probably my own stolen money. I paused, gathering myself, feeling Emma's presence behind me giving me strength. But here's what you didn't take. You didn't take my strength. You didn't take my ability to fight back. You didn't take my voice. And because I fought back, because I refused to let this go quietly, you're facing consequences. Other people you targeted in the future are safe from you. That's worth something. That's worth everything. I looked at Judge Walsh. I spent 27 years as a nurse. I've taken care of people at their most vulnerable, their most frightened, their most broken. I've held hands through diagnosis deliveries. I've cleaned wounds and administered medications and watched people either recover or not. I thought I understood human nature. I thought I could tell the difference between good people and bad people. My voice cracked slightly, but I pushed through. But I learned that it's not that simple. People I loved, people I trusted with my life, turned out to be capable of calculated cruelty. And I had to make a choice. Stay silent to keep the peace, or speak up and demand justice. I chose justice. One chose myself. And I'd make that choice again. I sat back down. Emma immediately took my hand again, squeezing hard. Michael leaned over and whispered, "That was perfect." Judge Walsh called Diane to the stand next. My sister had taken a plea deal that resulted in 2 years of probation instead of prison time, contingent on her cooperation with the investigation and full restitution efforts. She'd already surrendered her real estate license and would likely never work in that field again. She walked to the witness stand with her head down, barely able to look at the judge or anyone else in the courtroom. "Mrs. Marsh," Judge Walsh said, her tone less harsh than it had been with Richard but still firm, "you've pleaded guilty to conspiracy to commit wire fraud and accessory after the fact. You've agreed to testify against your husband and cooperate fully with restitution efforts. Is that correct?" "Yes, Your Honor." Diane's voice was a whisper. "I need you to speak up, Mrs. Marsh." "Yes, Your Honor," Diane said louder, her voice shaking. "Tell me in your own words what your role was in these crimes." Diane took a shaky breath. "Richard told me he had an investment opportunity, that if we could just get some capital together, we could turn things around. We were in so much debt from his previous failed business ventures. The house was underwater. We were drowning. She wiped her eyes with a tissue. He said he could access some money temporarily, that it would just be a short-term loan and we'd pay it back. I didn't ask questions. I didn't want to know the details because I think part of me understood it was wrong. When Nancy's money showed up in our account, I knew. I knew it was hers. But I convinced myself it would be okay, that we'd pay her back before she even noticed. But you didn't pay her back, Judge Walsh said. No. Because there was no investment. Richard used the money to pay off debts, to buy things to maintain our appearance of success. And then when Nancy discovered what happened, instead of coming clean, instead of begging for forgiveness, I lied. I tried to manipulate her into dropping the charges. I used her daughter against her. I did everything wrong. Why? Judge Walsh asked. Why not just tell the truth from the beginning? Because I was ashamed. Because I become someone I didn't recognize. My whole life, Nancy was the responsible one, the good one. I was the screw-up who needed saving. And I resented her for it even while I depended on her. When Richard gave me a way to take from her instead of begging from her, I took it. Not because I had to. Because I wanted to. And I'll regret that for the rest of my life. She looked directly at me for the first time, tears streaming down her face. Nancy, I know you'll never forgive me. I don't deserve forgiveness. But I need you to know that every good memory we have, every moment of our childhood, every time I told you I loved you that was real. The person who stole from you, who lied to you, who betrayed you, that person was real too. Both things can be true. And I have to live with that. I felt Emma tense beside me, felt her looking at me to see my reaction. I kept my face neutral, my eyes forward. Diane's words were probably genuine. They might even be true. But they changed nothing. Some betrayals are too fundamental to repair. Judge Walsh sentenced Richard immediately after. 7 years in federal prison. He'd be 60 to when he got out. His life and career destroyed, his marriage almost certainly over. Diane was sentenced to 2 years of probation, 500 hours of community service, and a permanent criminal record that would follow her forever. The restitution process was outlined. The house would be sold, assets liquidated, payments structured over time. I'd get most of my money back eventually, though not all of it, and not the years of security I lost. As we left the courthouse, reporters were waiting outside. The case had attracted local media attention. A story of family betrayal and financial fraud that fit neatly into the kind of cautionary tale people love to read about in the newspaper. Ms. Patterson, how do you feel about the sentence, Ms. Patterson? Will you reconcile with your sister, Ms. Patterson? What would you say to other victims of family financial fraud? Michael guided me past them with practiced efficiency, not stopping, not engaging. But I paused at the top of the courthouse steps and turned back. I'd say this, I called out, loud enough for the reporters to hear. Don't let anyone make you feel guilty for protecting yourself. Don't let anyone convince you that staying silent is more important than seeking justice. Family is important, but it's not more important than your dignity, your security, or your right to be treated with respect. If someone steals from you, even if they share your DNA, they've made a choice, and you have every right to hold them accountable for that choice. The cameras flashed. Reporters scribbled notes. Michael looked at me with something like pride. Good, he said quietly as we walked to his car. That needed to be said. The restitution process was complex and painfully slow. The house was sold underwater but still generating some equity after the mortgage was paid off. Richard's boat that he'd been so proud of, the one he bought just last summer with what was probably stolen money, was auctioned off for $12,000. Diane's luxury car, a BMW she leased with funds from Clearwater Holdings, was surrendered back to the dealer. Richard's truck, Diane's jewelry, even the expensive furniture they'd bought during their spending spree with my money, all of it liquidated. The offshore account in the Cayman Islands was more complicated, requiring international cooperation and legal procedures I didn't fully understand. But eventually, those funds were frozen and recovered, adding to the restitution pool. In the end, over the course of 8 months, I recovered $14,800. Not the full $16,000 I'd lost. Not the interest that money would have earned. Not compensation for the emotional devastation. The months of stress, the family relationships destroyed forever. But it was something. It was enough to restore part of my security. Enough to rebuild with. The other victims in Richard's scheme received partial restitution too, though none of us got everything back. One of them was my cousin Margaret in Jacksonville, who'd loaned Richard $8,000 for a business venture that never existed. Another was Richard's own mother, elderly and trusting, who'd given him access to an account with $30,000 to help with investments. He drained it completely. Learning about his mother hit me harder than I expected. She was 83 years old, living on Social Security and a small pension. That $30,000 had been everything she had, her entire life savings. Richard had stolen from his own mother without hesitation. What kind of person does that? What kind of person looks at the people who love them and sees only resources to be exploited? Michael's fees were substantial, as I'd known they would be. Legal representation of this quality didn't come cheap, especially for a case that had dragged on for months. But he structured a payment plan I could manage, spreading it out over 2 years. Never pressuring me, always treating me with respect and compassion. "You did the right thing," he told me in our final meeting, sitting in his office with the late afternoon sun streaming through the windows. Not everyone has the courage to hold family accountable. Most people would have let it go, absorbed the loss to avoid the conflict. But you didn't. You stood up for yourself. That takes real strength. I didn't feel strong, I admitted. Most days I felt terrified, guilty, angry, sad. Everything except strong. Strength isn't the absence of fear or doubt, Michael said. It's acting in spite of those feelings. You did that. You should be proud. Emma and I started going to therapy together. Sessions every Tuesday evening with a counselor named Dr. Sarah Martinez, who specialized in family trauma. At first, I'd been resistant to the idea. Therapy felt like an admission that I couldn't handle this on my own, that I was broken somehow. But Emma had insisted, and I learned that sometimes accepting help is its own form of strength. The sessions were hard. We talked about trust and boundaries and how to protect ourselves without becoming cynical and closed off to the world. We talked about my relationship with Diane, how to grieve someone who's still alive, how to accept that some relationships can't be repaired no matter how much we might want them to be. We talked about Emma's feelings too, her confusion about what happened, her anger at her aunt, her fear that I'd been permanently damaged by the betrayal. "I worry about you, Mom," Emma said during one session, twisting a tissue in her hands. "I worry that you won't ever trust anyone again, that you'll spend the rest of your life waiting for people to hurt you." "I worry about that too," I admitted. "But I'm trying. I'm learning that there's a difference between being cautious and being closed off. I can protect myself without shutting everyone out." Dr. Martinez helped us work through those fears, gave us tools for communication and boundary setting, helped us strengthen our relationship in ways I hadn't realized we needed. Emma had been living with me for over a year by that point, and while we'd always loved each other, living together as adults had been challenging. The therapy helped us navigate that dynamic, helped us see each other as whole people rather than just mother and daughter. "I'm proud of you, Mom," Emma said one evening as we sat on our back porch watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and purple. The air was warm but not oppressive. That perfect Florida evening temperature before summer's brutal heat arrives. For fighting back, for not just accepting what they did. "I didn't have a choice," I said, cradling a glass of iced tea in my hands. "Yes, you did. You could have let it go. Tried to keep the peace. Let them get away with it to avoid conflict. A lot of people would have done that. But you didn't. You stood up for yourself. You demanded accountability. That's not easy, especially when it's family." She was right. I had made a choice. The hard choice. The painful choice. But the right one. Diane tried to contact me multiple times over the following year. Letters arrived at my house, forwarded through Michael's office to avoid giving her my new address. I'd moved shortly after the trial, not far, just to a different neighborhood closer to the beach, a smaller place that felt more secure somehow. A fresh start in a space that didn't carry memories of family dinners that had ended in betrayal. The letters were long, rambling, filled with apologies and explanations and pleas for forgiveness. She was in therapy too, she wrote. She was working minimum wage jobs to make her restitution payments and do her community service. Her marriage to Richard was over, divorce finalized. She'd lost all her friends, her career, her reputation. She was living with the consequences of her choices. She wanted me to know she was sorry, that she understood what she'd done, that she'd give anything to go back and make different decisions. I read each letter once, carefully, and then filed them away in a folder I kept in my desk drawer. I didn't respond to any of them. Maybe someday I would. Maybe someday the pain would fade enough that I could have a conversation with her, could try to understand how the sister I loved had become someone capable of stealing from me. But not yet. Not now. Maybe not ever. Some relationships, once broken in certain ways, can't be repaired. Some betrayals are too fundamental to complete. Forgiveness is complicated and I wasn't ready to offer it. I'd made peace with that uncertainty, with the possibility that I might never forgive her, that the door between us might stay closed permanently. And I was okay with that. 1 year after the trial, I sat in a community center meeting room with other survivors of family financial fraud. This was a support group Agent Morrison had connected me with, a space where we could share our stories without judgment. There was Margaret, whose son had forged her signature. There was Robert, whose daughter had maxed out credit cards in his name. There was Susan, whose husband had been draining their retirement account. Each story was different, but the emotions were the same. Betrayal. Shock. Guilt over pursuing legal action. Grief over destroyed relationships. The hardest part, Margaret said, is that people judge you. They say, "How could you send your own son to prison?" Like I'm the monster. Blood may be thicker than water, I said, but poison is thickest of all. Sometimes protection means distance. The group nodded. We understood each other. I started volunteering with a nonprofit that helped elderly people protect themselves from financial exploitation. I gave talks, shared my story, taught people how to recognize warning signs. You don't know anyone access to your accounts, I'd tell audiences. It's okay to protect yourself. It's okay to pursue justice, even against people you love. My bank account slowly rebuilt. Between restitution payments and my salary, I was able to save again. I worked with a financial advisor who helped me set up better protections, multiple accounts with different banks, creating barriers that would make it harder for anyone to access everything. Emma thrived. The therapy helped, but more than that, witnessing my fight sparked something in her. She enrolled in law school, decided to specialize in elder law. You inspired me, Mom, she said. I want to help other people do what you did. We were closer now than we'd ever been. On the anniversary of that awful dinner at the cellar, Emma and I went back, not to confront demons, but because we liked their food and refused to let their crimes steal anything else from us. We sat near the windows. We ordered wine and talked about Emma's classes, my work, the pottery class I'd started. Are you happy, Mom? Emma asked. I thought carefully. Was I happy? I still carried scars. I still had moments of anger and grief, but I also had my dignity, my self-respect, a daughter who loved me, friends who supported me, work that mattered. I'm getting there, I said. I'm not the same person I was. That Nancy was more trusting, maybe more naive. This Nancy is harder, more cautious, more protective. But she's also stronger. She knows what she's capable of. She knows she can survive betrayal and still stand. Emma raised her wine glass. To survival. To strength. To refusing to let them win. I clinked my glass against hers. To choosing ourselves. I'm Nancy. I'm 52 years old and I live in Daytona Beach, Florida. I'm a nurse. I'm a mother. I'm a survivor of family betrayal and financial fraud. I'm someone who learned that protecting yourself isn't selfish, that pursuing justice isn't vindictive, and that standing up for what's right is worth the cost. Even when the cost is high, my bank account is rebuilding, my sense of security is gradually returning, my relationship with Emma is stronger than it's ever been. I've made new friends through the support group, joined that nonprofit helping other victims, and yes, started that pottery class where my bowls still come out lopsided, but I love it anyway. I still live 3 blocks from the ocean. I still hear the waves every night before I fall asleep. But I'm different now. Harder in some ways, softer in others. More cautious with my trust, but more confident in my ability to survive when that trust is broken. The sunset tonight from my new porch is particularly beautiful. Pink and gold spreading across the sky, reflecting off the ocean in the distance. I'm sitting here with a glass of iced tea, and for the first time in a long time, I feel something close to peace. Not happiness, not yet, but peace, and that's enough. If you've made it this far in my story, thank you for listening. Thank you for witnessing what happened to me. If you've experienced something similar, if someone you loved has betrayed you, I want you to know that it's okay to fight back. It's okay to choose yourself. It's okay to let relationships end when they become toxic, even if they're family. You don't owe anyone access to your life, your resources, or your peace of mind just because you share DNA. Take care of yourself. Protect yourself. And know that you're stronger than you think you are. If this story resonated with you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Leave a comment and tell me your thoughts. Stories like this need to be told so others know they're not alone. That's everything.